Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's start a whole new entry here, a whole new series based on some of your new suggestions. Thank you so much again for your patience on this series. Again, it was probably over a year actually since I did my last original video. So thank you so much for your patience. And as a nice treat, I thought I would make a video, almost, I don't know if I call it a special edition one, but it definitely has to do with the topic that a lot of you have been requesting already, or at least based on it. So I don't know if y'all are aware, but I actually have done a video already on shadow people. In fact, I did it probably about 3 years or so ago, and I found the link and I'll include it below so that way you can see it. I also did a video about sleep paralysis, which is also tied to, again, shadow people. And this was done sometime last year as well, and I'll include the link for that too. So if you haven't had a chance yet, check out those links and then you'll see my take on those particular subjects. This, though, if you could call it a special edition video, has to do with a variation of the shadow people. So I did talk about this particular aspect in my shadow people video, but this one I wanted to actually dedicate one specific video just to this topic. I kind of like give this person, if it is a person, its own specific spot separate from everything else, only because it has to do with the fact that it could be an actual separate phenomenon. When I was reading the information on this, I was telling myself, this is rich, this is actually very good info to place in a separate video. So it has to do with this. It's known as the phenomenon of the Hat Man. I'm sure you've heard of that particular term before, especially anything reading shadow people. So let's go ahead and let's make this the special edition video just dedicated to the Hat Man. And once again, when I'm talking about shadow people, the reason I don't really talk about them too much is because it's kind of like a subject I like to stay away from. But if I approach it, like I said in my other videos, like on a scientific standpoint, more on analysis rather than, let's say, something else, then I think that would help more. So that's why how you're going to see it here. Kind of like the same way I would talk about any other cryptid or monster out there. So what is this Hat Man, or the phenomenon associated with it? Well, the Hat Man is a very specific entity that seems to follow people, sometimes in the cases from their childhood up until today, up until their very current age. And while a lot of people naturally, including myself, think that it's part of the shadow people phenomenon or the visitations of the shadow people, there are others out there that still, and they have good reasons too. I mean, I don't doubt these. In other words, and I can see their angles. They believe that this is a separate entity from the shadow people. It has to do with the fact that it's the way that this being, this entity, whatever you can call it, the way that it interacts and the way that it's basically separate from the shadow people themselves. So that's why, again, I wanted to present a separate phenomenon. But first, the characteristics of the Hat Man. Well, basically, the reason why it's called the Hat Man, it has to do with the fact that it's something that always seems to wear a hat. Every person that encounters this very specific entity notes that it's something involving an older style hat. That to me is quite fascinating because why is it always an older style hat? Why is it not, let's say, a baseball cap? Why is it not something along the lines of a sombrero or one of those New York style hats? Why is it always the older style hat? It's very fascinating when you get down to it, how it has to be that specific hat that this creature wears. But that's essentially why it's called the Hat Man. So other characteristics are this. This is a creature that apparently is darker in color, in this case the blackness of it, than some of the other shadow people that people see. Like I was reading some of the information. There's a website, in fact, dedicated to this called the Hatman Project. Again, that's why this thing has its own separate distinction, because it has people that are creating actual websites for it, the hatmanproject.com. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, it's quite fascinating. You'll see a bunch of entries from people describing their own experiences. But yes, one of the most common ones seems to be that this thing is just a darkness, a blackness, associated with it, darker than anything else people have ever seen. I mean, people say that as well from shadow people, but this thing, the way that it has like just a blackness within it, like it's almost like a black hole. Nothing seems to escape this. It's complete. You could have a completely dark room, and then you'll have this thing still be darker than its own surroundings. So coupled with the wide brim hat, the darkness with it of being a solid black mass, that's pretty much it. You can always make out a human-like figure with it, always that of a man, seems to be always that of a taller man as well. And in some cases, though, they people see no eyes at all, no nose, no mouth, nothing, just completely one solid black mass. But for a few terrifying cases, people actually see these brimming red eyes. So these eyes that just seem to wholly focus right on the people that are having this unfortunate experience that night. That's another telltale characteristic too regarding the Hat Man. So shadow people, for the most part, it seems to be like those are random. People see them, people don't. There's not a pattern associated to them. Not the Hat Man. The Hat Man seems to be something, some entity that just makes, if not a daily appearance, a more of a patterned appearance to the people that it's haunting. So imagine that. Imagine having something come by either on a daily basis for those four unfortunate few, or having something come by on a weekly basis. Whatever is the case, this Hat Man will just stand in front of people and just continue to stare at them. This is another pattern that people describe as well. The way that this Hat Man is staring at them is different from some of the other shadow people. Some of the shadow people seem to be described as being just random, like walking from one hallway to another, appearing from the ceilings, in some cases crouching towards corners. There's that type of encounters, all terrifying, but still, it seems like it's random. Here with the Hat Man, this thing purposely seems to walk into a room, in some cases right straight through the door, in other words, using more of an intelligence, if you will, and then it presents itself there, standing, just completely dominating the entire room, and then it just stares from that location. And then when it's done, people state that it doesn't, like, in other words, when it's done inspecting people, because apparently it has a curiosity about the people that it's staring at, almost like if it were tilting its head, wondering, what this person is. And then when it's done, it just moves away and either walks away and goes outside the room, or it just goes through another section of the room instead of the door, and then that way it walks out. In the quotations, probably the closest thing you could describe it as walking out. So again, another separate distinction for this creature, because some of the other shadow people, whenever they're finished with whatever they're doing, it just seems like they just disappear, just outright disappear. Not this thing, it'll walk away from people. So quite fascinating when I was reading that information, again, denotes something else different, a more of an intelligence, because it recognizes the room, the surroundings with it, and then obviously the door, and then it utilizes that to move outward as well. Another distinction too about the encounters with the Hat Man is this. Some people, it seems like more often than not, report there being a huge, terrifying experience when this thing is staring at them, almost as if it's creating this terror, and then in a reciprocal manner, it's feeding off of the terror that people have as it's staring at them. So very, very disconcerting when I was reading that info, because here you have something like this that seems to enjoy exactly what's happening there at that moment. It's absolutely causing so much panic in people's eyes, and then it's using that to feed off of it. So crazy. This is not something that you want to essentially run into, this fedora Hat Man, which is again the type of hat that this being has, because then you'll have that experience of just pure sheer terror. Now, as far as how to get rid of this Hat Man, it seems like this is the cause. So either A, try to pray if you can. That way, whatever this thing is, it'll hear your prayers and hopefully walk away. Or you can forcefully tell which has happened with other shadow people that I've read as well. Tell these things to leave you alone. And then that way you'll be able to stay in your room and not have whatever these things are, particularly this hat man, stay there with you as well. Another one that's a little bit more harder is to not be afraid, which depending on the person is up to them. It's hard because some people are just more naturally afraid than others, but those seems to be the three telltale answers to make sure that if you encounter this hat man, you will not have something like a different one. But here's where the distinction also is separate. You can do that with regular shadow people, and that seems to get the job done. It's finished, and that's it. You won't have these things back. But with these hat men or hat men, this seems to not work. It doesn't have like a fixed effect. People still state that even after forcefully asking that hat man to leave, it'll almost look at them again curiously, almost like, did they really just tell me to leave? Something along those lines, and then it'll leave on its own. Again, a separate form of intelligence, something else with this hat man that seems to have it be just on its own realm. And then it'll leave when it truly leaves, and then that's it. So, but that's pretty much all the info that I could find that stood out when it comes to the Hat Man. Again, something involving a shadow person, or is it something different? People still believe that it is different than the shadow people. Myself, I'm of the opinion, just looking from the outside in, that I think is a different form of a shadow person. You know how like snakes or dogs or wolves kind of like the same, but they're different from each other. That's how I believe that Hatman is in this case. But there are others who completely just believe that it is its own separate entity who just got, in this case, placed mistakenly with the notion of the shadow people or shadow person. So, what do you guys think? Let me know what your specific comments are towards this. Anybody out there that happened to be unlucky and happen to run into this hat man maybe during your childhood, which again seems to be another notation. By the way, that's another thing too. People not just seem to be running into it in its rooms, but if you've ever had a fear involving basements as a child, that's where it also seems to feed off of that fear. Basements by themselves are already spooky. They happen to be down, let's say in the cellar areas, so to speak, and then they have darkness associated with them since there's always just like one light that seems to light the whole basement. So it seems like this is another natural element of the Hat Man, and that's where a lot of people seem to experience them from their childhood because two and two, in this case, children being scared of basements equals a perfect opportunity for the Hat Man to stay there as well. But yes, please, if you have any experiences on them, share with the audience. Share your comments below. I'm sure there are those out there that have discovered them, and unfortunately have, and then that way you'll be able to share under the comments below. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always, and be sure again to check out the links to my other videos, the ones I made before on shadow people, and then the other one also on sleep paralysis. So, all right, everyone. Thanks again as always. Take care.